And we shift our focus now to key business economic issues of the day with Dr. Byoung-joo, head of KL&P Consulting and our regular commentator on this program. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Now, let's talk about the Korean government's reportedly cutting down on its spending for the remainder of the year. Now, it was just a few months ago that the National Assembly passed the budget supplement. Now, what's happening, and is this a fundamental, turning point in economic policy for this country?
Not quite that yet, but according to the Ministry of Finance announcement yesterday, they are indeed asking many ministries in terms of coming up with their plan to cut down their budget. Basically, what's happening is within the remaining budget that has not been executed or implemented, the Finance Ministry is asking all these different ministries to come up with a plan to cut down about 15% of these project budget, number one, and also 15% cut in terms of their expense budget, their operation budget altogether. These are quite a large numbers, and for sure government officials, first of all, will be affected because some of their business expenses budget will be affected, meaning the meals that they will have to have with outside people for their contacts, business activities, that will be definitely affected. But to answer your question, does it look like this is a fundamental shift of the direction of the economic policy itself yet? Because usually the finance ministry has emphasized that usually by the end of the year, the unexecuted budget records about somewhere between 5 to 6 trillion won every year. So when they ask for this kind of budget cut, it's not like going over and beyond the normal, usual expectation about how budget will be implemented. So they just want to try to minimize whatever the budget that's not implemented by the end of the year because the overall situation is tight. And they're saying that's all there is to it, but not right like a fundamental shift from the expansionary approach that we saw back in March when the government introduced the supplementary budget and then like all of a sudden tightening up. That, they say, is not the case here.
Now, obviously, all of this is happening because of the dwindling tax revenue. Now, how bad is the situation?
Overall, the plan is government had the expenditure plan on one hand, also the revenue plan. Revenue plan was projected to be about 210 trillion won for this year, and they are projecting at this point because of the shortage in terms of like a tax coming in this year because as a result of slow economic growth and other factors, there will be at least 7 to 8 trillion won shortage in terms of their tax revenue. So indeed, they said this one is indeed necessary. On the longer run, however, what's happening is, the finance ministry has a medium-term plan, the fiscal management plan. And according to that, next year there will be again like about over 5 trillion won shortage in terms of the deficit, in terms of how the budget will be composed. And the year after that, year 2015, they are talking about expectedly about 4.8 trillion won deficit once again. So these deficits are being built up at this moment. So indeed, there is a concern about the overall fiscal management here. And indeed, overall, this trend of the fiscal tightening or imbalance in the budget seems to be something that seems to be continuing in the future. Of course, politically speaking, that means a very controversial question about whether all this welfare budget that has been promised by the new, relatively speaking, still new president will be fulfilled or not. And I think that will continue to be debated. At this point, government is promising that the important campaign pledges, at least, will continue to be fulfilled. But they're just trying to make overall budget management more efficient. That's what they're saying.
Now, critics are saying that the government is actually to blame for all this because the baseline government projections for economic growth have constantly missed the mark up until now. Would you say this is a fair criticism?
I think there's some sense to it because overall the key foundation of this kind of budget prediction itself, the central element to it is, of course, the economic forecast. So let's bring up some of these numbers and show the gaps here, basically. For example, last year, of course, there was a huge gap here initially government was forecasting 4.5% growth last year, 2012, but the actual growth that was materialized was about 2%. So of course there was a difficulty in terms of managing the budget here, in terms of dealing with the tax revenue deficiency, shortcoming and all that. And this year that seems to be continuing on again, once again. We don't have the final number for this year yet, but expectedly it will be about 2.7%, even though initial the projection that current government budget is based upon is based on the 4.0% growth this year. So once again, that considerably big gap is something that critics are criticizing big time. Why didn't the government come up with the more realistic measure here? But the thing is, government actions here are sometimes partly declaratory as well, meaning setting the goal and making sure that economic growth achieves that point. So I think partially government kind of should escape the overall blame here because they had this goal set up right here. So that is what's going on. Next year is a concern. 3.9% is the forecast from which the government will be drawing its budget upon. By probably the after Chuseok times, initial budget will be coming up based on this projection. But KDI projection for next year is 3.6%. So once again, the gap may actually linger on. So we'll need more time on making judgment on that side.
But there are talks that even that 3.9% projection for next year isn't trustworthy.
That is actually debated big time at this point. But the thing is, on one side, to take the government side, Bank of Korea's projection is about 4% growth. So 3.9 is not kind of totally outrageous or outlandish here. But the thing is, still there is uncertainty about what the actual growth rate will be here. And a lot of people are talking about different, the factors that will determine the final outcome here. Overall, the government ministries are asking for this budget for next year before Finance Ministry, finalizes its initial draft. The overall amount goes up to 364.7 trillion won. 364 trillion won budget is what is out there based on the demands from different ministries. Of course, Finance Ministry will have to cut it down big time. And they're saying they will have to come up with a solid draft based on that 3.9% projection. Your criticism, I think the criticism that you mentioned is coming from the critics who are saying, well, this finance ministry and the finance minister, the deputy prime minister himself is a little bit soft on numbers here. And some people are even saying 3.9% is like a gesture to offer a look of more realistic when they are actually wanted to go for over 4% growth projection, but they came out with 3.9 right below that, and it's a political trick that they're saying. But we can't read the minds of the deputy prime minister here, so we can't make any judgment on that. But keeping in mind, Bank of Korea's forecast once again stands at 4%. I think we should give him more time to see how realistic the budget draft will be made available after Chuseok break.
Right, so going back to our first point of discussion, should we anticipate a lot of negative side effects from this, from the government's spending cuts for the remainder of this year? I mean, should we as average Koreans be worried about that as well?
Yeah, you raised that concern earlier on. The thing is, what government is saying is that they're only focusing on mostly on the expense side of the budget as well as the unimplemented side of the budget here. So they're saying there shouldn't be much of the downside impact or negative impact here. They're saying the overall, for instance, social infrastructure, building bridges and roads and all that kind of stuff, they will continue on. And also welfare side, for political reasons, they will continue on. So only the rest of the budget will be trimmed. So therefore, they are really working hard. The finance ministry officials took a lot of pain yesterday to emphasize the point that they're working very hard to minimize the impact of the government, impact on the economic growth for the remainder of the year. So let's buy their words for now. And let's give them some time and see what happens by the end of the year.
All right, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and wait until the end of the year.
Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Kim Byoung-joo, thank you so much for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.